Armed and on the run, police say they can't be certain they've caught the Berlin truck attacker. They are questioning a Pakistani man over the deaths of 12 people, but he denies involvement as detectives admit a gun is still missing. Nearly 50 people were injured in the attack on a Christmas market in the German capital, but Angela Merkel says the country can't become paralysed by terror.
We must, as things stand now, assume it was a terrorist attack. I know it would be especially hard for us all to bear if it were confirmed that the person who committed this act was someone who sought protection and asylum in Germany.
Also, this lunchtime, after decades of service, the Queen is to step down as patron from 25 key organisations. Nicola Sturgeon calls for Scotland to stay in the single market, even if the rest of the UK leaves. And when Michelle Obama met Oprah, the First Lady's take on America's future when her husband leaves the White House.
What else do you have if you don't have hope?
Yeah.
What do you give your kids if you can't give them hope?
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hussain.
Good afternoon. In the last hour, a development in the hunt for the suspect who crashed a lorry into a Christmas market in Berlin, killing 12 people. Overnight, special forces arrested a man believed to be from Pakistan and carried out a series of raids. He is being questioned by detectives but denies being the attacker. Now, police say it's not clear if the man they've detained is really the driver. The gun used in the attack is still missing, and they've urged people to be on alert. We'll get the latest from our security editor in Berlin on that investigation in just a moment. First, here's Angus Walker.
A Christmas market, now a scene of carnage. A truck used as a weapon of terror carved through the crowds, killing 12 people in its path, injuring almost 50. Smashing into stalls selling festive gifts, the branches of a tree and decorations left hanging from the cab of the lorry. The speed and force of the attack clear to see from the damage. This morning, Chancellor Angela Merkel, looking saddened, still shocked, spoke to the nation.
We must, as things stand, assume this was a terrorist attack. I know it would be especially hard for us all to bear if it were confirmed that the person who committed this act was someone who sought protection and asylum in Germany. This would be especially despicable for the many, many Germans who day in, day out are working for refugees, as well as those who need our protection and who make an effort to integrate into our society.
In custody in the back of this van, a suspect, an asylum seeker, probably Pakistani, according to the Interior Ministry, arrested overnight. But the German police are now saying they got the wrong man and the attacker is still on the loose, probably armed. The truck was driven into the market at around 8 in the evening. This amateur video, filmed shortly afterwards, shows how the wooden cabin-style shops were flattened. The vehicle appears to have been hijacked in central Berlin earlier in the day. A Polish lorry driver was found shot dead inside. Police say they're searching for a handgun used as the murder weapon. As an increasingly confused investigation continues, the German Interior Minister briefed the media this morning. No terror group has yet claimed responsibility, he said. This was an attack aimed at innocent crowds enjoying Christmas time, but also a strike at the heart of Germany, its politics, policies, and those in power. The season of peace shattered. Angus Walker, ITV News.
Let's join our security editor, Rohit Katru, in Berlin. Rohit, a confusing picture then from the police about the investigation.
Well, that's right, Nina, and the German authorities are notoriously cautious when sharing this sort of information. But at the very least, this investigation appears to be incredibly confusing this lunchtime. At the worst, the situation is actually very dangerous if the suspect is still on the run. Certainly, it appears to be somewhat embarrassing for the German authorities. Some of the media here are reporting that the German authorities aren't quite sure whether the man arrested last night, this Pakistani refugee, is the man who was behind the wheel of that lorry yesterday evening. However, one newspaper is saying, quoting a police source saying, we got the wrong man. Early this morning, special forces from the German police raided the site of a former airport, Tempelhof, which was an iconic Nazi site and is, under Angela Merkel, the site of a refugee centre. I've been speaking to some of the refugees there who say they are incredibly worried now about what the future holds and whether this situation might cause Germans to turn against refugees.
OK, Rohit Khatru, thank you. We saw a summer of terror this year in Europe and now this. So how should politicians respond, especially to those accusations by some that link Angela Merkel's policies to this act of mass murder? To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Sophia Besch, an expert in German policy from the think tank, the Centre of European Reform, and the Professor of National Security Studies, John Gearson from King's College London. Thank you both for coming in. Professor Gearson, if I can start with you, just on this, where we're at right now, is it almost inevitable that you have such a confusing investigation in the hours after such a big attack?
I think it's not surprising that they don't know exactly what's going on yet, but I do think the German authorities have got to get better at how they communicate, have a single named spokesperson or one minister who's giving regular briefings so that the public don't start getting mixed messages. And they need to send out pretty quickly a message that, is it safe or not to go to Christmas markets in Germany? The likelihood is it is safe, but they need to be coherent and consistent in their messaging.
Sophia, should it be part of the debate in general what Angela Merkel has done in terms of the German Chancellor's policies and whether that can be in any way linked to what happened there yesterday?
Right. Well, I think it's important to note that we still don't have all the information yet. We still can't for sure link this attack to an asylum seeker. But it's a very difficult situation for Angela Merkel to be in. The biggest point of criticism of those who oppose her is still her open stance on refugees. And attacks like these, there will be parallels, for example, to the attack that we saw last New Year in Cologne. We're running up to the anniversary of that, and she lost quite a few votes over this.
How damaging could this be when the truth comes out?
It could be very damaging to her. Anti-immigrant parties like the Alternative für Deutschland have already used this attack to criticize Merkel for her refugee stance, and the voters that the CDU, her conservative party, has lost to these anti-immigrant movements are likely going to feel confirmed by these kinds of events.
This is the politics, Professor Gearson. In terms of the actual attack, is it ever possible to stop somebody using a vehicle as a killing machine in this way? We saw it in Nice.
Well, there are some key security procedures that can be taken to protect large concentrations of people. Cities like London have, for many years, seen more barricades and barriers, which are part of urban architecture now to protect groups, and I think the same will happen in Germany and other countries. But the important thing for the German authorities is to prove and demonstrate that they are A, in control of the situation, B, to reassure people what they can do, but yes, make publics accept and understand that there is a level of risk for all of us in Europe at the moment from groups and individuals inspired by groups like ISIS, Daesh.
Angela Merkel has also said today that the country can't be paralysed by terror. Very briefly, these attacks are thankfully extremely rare.
They are rare, but as I say, I think the country like Germany will not be paralysed by these sorts of events, and it's important to remember that they're not inevitable. There hasn't been a second Nice-style attack. This is a terrible incident in Germany. It does show that there are individuals who want to carry out attacks, but it's wrong to assume that, as is sometimes said, the terrorists only have to be lucky once. They don't. They have to be lucky all the time to not get caught.
Professor Gearson, Sophia Besch, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, here in Britain, police have increased patrols at Christmas markets after what has happened in Berlin. Major events planned for the new year are also being reviewed. Our correspondent Damon Green is at a market in Manchester. Damon.
Well, it's the last couple of days of this Christmas market in Manchester. Over the years, a phenomenally successful event into its 17th year now. The most recent figures show that maybe 9 million people a year will come to markets like this one in Manchester and spend around £90 million. People come here because they feel safe, they feel secure. I'm joined now by Sir Richard Lees, who's the leader of Manchester City Council. When you heard about yesterday's attack, it must have made your heart sink.
Well, there is a reaction of horror. There is clearly, for anybody, our hearts going out to the injured, the families of the dead, to the city of Berlin as a whole. And we clearly have seen far too many of these sorts of attacks in the recent months and years. But we need to make sure that we never ever get used to them. This has always got to be something that our heartfelt reaction is the same whenever they happen.
But noticeable coming to this market, security is always there. It's unobtrusive, but it's tight. What are you doing to make sure people here are safe and they feel secure here?
Well, a number of things. Clearly, in the light of what's happened yesterday, there is a heightened police presence in and around the markets, so there is more security. But year in, year out, we maintain a regular contact with Greater Manchester Police. We have good intelligence about what's going on, and we're able to react appropriately.
The Greater Manchester Police say they are increasing patrols. They have no intelligence that anything may be directed here specifically, but I've been talking to shoppers here. They say if we change our behaviour, the terrorists have won. And I must say that the town hall later will have a display of the German flag projected across it in solidarity with the people of Berlin.
Damon Green, thank you. And there is much more on this story on our website, including the latest on that police investigation in Berlin. Just go to itv.com/news. Still to come, the rest of the day's news, including the new laser therapy described as truly transformative in the treatment of prostate cancer. And when Obama met Oprah, the First Lady, on life in and beyond the White House. Before that, Buckingham Palace has announced the Queen is to step down as patron from a number of national organisations. The Palace says the roles will be passed on to other members of the royal family. Our royal editor, Tim Hewitt, is here. Just how much is the Queen stepping back now, then?
Not a lot, but it's nevertheless, I think, significant. She's giving up her patronage of 25 organisations. She's the patron of around 600. So we're talking something in the region of 5%. The palace describe it as a gradual shift in management rather than a big bang change. But it is clearly a signal that she's starting to rein in a little bit on the volume of work that she undertakes. Some of these organisations are quite high profile. Several of them are sporting, Lawn Tennis Association, Amateur Swimming Association, Rugby Union, Rugby League. Presumably they will be taken over by the younger royals, William and Harry, and the Duchess of Cambridge, and among the others, the Battersea Dogs Home and Save the Children.
Stepping back from some of those royal duties, but no sign, no signals that she's thinking of stepping down.
No, we don't use the A word for abdication. No, the release of the portrait of the Queen and her heir, the Prince of Wales, a few days ago, did get people talking about her stepping aside, but officials are very, very wary about this and very uneasy about that sort of speculation. They say she's absolutely still in charge and that none of that is changed, and they dismiss stepping down out of hand. I mean, on her 21st birthday in 1947, the Queen said, "My whole life, whether it be long or short, will be dedicated to your service," and there's no indication at the moment that her view on that has changed at all.
Tim Hewitt, many thanks. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeons said her country should remain in the European single market even if the rest of the UK leaves during Brexit. In a detailed speech in Edinburgh, she said any other option would severely damage Scotland's economic, social and cultural interests. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
Nicola Sturgeon has something no one else seems to have, a plan for Brexit, even though she thinks leaving the EU is a bad idea.
Brexit is a problem not of Scotland's making.
Her preferred next best option is for Scotland to stay in the single market if the rest of Britain leaves it. But she says that wouldn't change the way the UK operates.
This option does not prioritise membership of the EU single market over continued free trade across the UK. It would safeguard both. Talk of a hard border for Scotland has always rung hollow.
Mrs Sturgeon proposes something like Norway's EU deal. Scotland would stay inside the single market if the rest of Britain leaves, but would be outside the customs union if Britain leaves that too. That would allow an open border with the rest of the UK. In Westminster, the government says they'll take the Scottish proposals seriously.
We're not ruling out options. We're looking at the options that the Scottish Government have put forward, and we're going to look at them carefully and in a considered way, and we're going to discuss them at the next meeting of our Joint Ministerial Council.
And of course, if Westminster doesn't listen, there is always this threat.
I have made clear, and I do so again today, that the option of independence must remain on the table.
These proposals raise some fiendishly tricky questions, not least of which is how can Scotland have freedom of movement with the European Union when the rest of Britain doesn't? The answer would not be straightforward. But then not much about Brexit is. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
The Kremlin has sent investigators to Turkey after the killing of Russia's ambassador in Ankara by a Turkish policeman. The officer was off duty when he shot Andrei Karlov in the back yesterday, apparently in protest at Russian interventions in Syria. Later, another gunman fired shots outside the nearby US embassy. The US has closed its 3 missions in Turkey today in response. And here, torrential rain and high-speed winds are forecast to batter the UK from Friday. The Met Office is warning Storm Barbara is approaching. 70-mile-per-hour winds and downpours are expected to cause delays on the roads and the railways. A new laser therapy is being described as truly transformative in curing prostate cancer after leaving half of trial patients disease-free. The treatment involves injecting light-sensitive fibres into the bloodstream before directing light beams at them, which destroys the cancer cells. Trials were carried out on 413 men across Europe. The treatment left 49% of patients completely cancer-free. Of the patients who weren't cured, only 6% needed their prostate removed, compared to 30% of patients who hadn't had the treatment. Dr. Ian Frame joins me now. He's the Director of Research at Prostate Cancer UK. This treatment, then, it really targets the cancer cells, does it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so this is reducing the collateral damage when other treatments may take out healthy cells and the prostate cancer cells at the same time. This is targeting into where the drug is needed most and into the prostate cancer cells themselves. How
excited are you by the results that nearly half really benefited from this treatment?
I think this is a game changer, a potential game changer for prostate cancer treatments. It's this introducing a middle ground from watching the cancer and then only acting if it starts to sort of spread outside the prostate gland, or the intense treatments of taking the prostate gland out itself or radiotherapy. This is a middle ground where if we get it right in being able to distinguish whether the cancer cells are aggressive or not, then we can use that treatment in those men who need it most and where it will act best.
Always the question with the trial, when could we see this on the NHS?
So this is a phase 3 trial. It is moving along, and I think I would say years probably. I've heard other people say it could be months. It is going through the regulatory processes just now. We've got another trial sort of following on its heels, which will be more important, and that's looking at the more aggressive cancer cells to make sure that it works with them as well.
And very briefly, we're running out of time. Could it in future be used for other cancers too?
I'm not sure about that. We were trying to find that out in the office earlier on.
OK, thank you. Dr. Ian Frame, thank you so much. Thank you. Finally, what happened when Michelle Obama met Oprah? 2 of the world's most famous women chatted about her husband's time in the White House, life for her daughters, life beyond it for the whole family and for America. Sally Biddulph was watching.
For the past 8 years, Michelle Obama has been America's First Lady, conscious of being a role model for girls everywhere. Alongside her chosen projects of tackling childhood obesity and educating girls, she's brought what she terms a levity to Washington.
We're the happy side of the White House. Americans need a little joy, and we were the joy masters.
The serious side of governing, though, weighs heavy on children. Malia was just 10 and Sasha was 7 when they became the first family.
What people don't understand is that you run, their lives stop at any age. I mean, the next family that comes in here, every person in that family, every child, every grandchild, their lives will be turned upside down in a way that no American really understands.
As she prepares to leave the White House, Mrs. Obama reflected on the state of US politics following an election which she says she found hard as a citizen.
Now we're feeling what not having hope feels like, you know? Hope is necessary. What do you give your kids if you can't give them hope?
And it's that looking to the future with a new president which has now taken centre stage. Mrs. Obama has met the Trumps and vowed to do all she can to support their administration.
My offer to Melania was, you know, you really don't know what you don't know until you're here. So the door is open, as I've told her. And as Laura Bush told me, we will do whatever they need to help them succeed.
With all that experience behind her, the First Lady of TV asked the First Lady if she would ever run for office. The answer was an emphatic no. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
Our main story this lunchtime. German police say they are unsure whether a Pakistani man they've arrested is the person behind an attack on a Christmas market which killed 12 people. While we've been on air, the chief prosecutor has said he's unsure whether there was more than one attacker. We will have the very latest on that and the rest of the day's developments on the ITV Evening News. That's with Mary Nightingale and James Mates from 6:30. From everyone on the Lunchtime team, bye-bye.